Good morning and welcome to another Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul Christie.
Good morning. Happy Monday.
Well, this weekend, we were gone, Saturday and Sunday, and we went to a storytelling class by Kelly Swanson. Fantastic facilitator.
Yay.
And it was for the Florida Speakers Association, which Heather is the president of. And it was a fantastic program, and so we wanted to give you a couple takeaways from that and also add some things that we have been thinking about and working on throughout the weekend.
Let me start by saying the reason that we brought Kelly Swanson back to the Florida Speakers Association, because she was with us last year too, and we were not able to attend. That's one of the perks of being president. You get to kind of call the lineup of the speakers. I happened to see Kelly present at a national conference about, I want to say it was about 2 years ago. And she got up there and she told a story that literally had us like moving forward on our seats of our chairs because we were so engrossed, so engaged in that story. And the way that she used her words, it literally felt like you were transported into her story. You could see her characters, you could see the scenes that she was describing, and you actually felt like you were right there with her. And so what happened is she gave a presentation on story crafting. And I think, all speakers know that the number one tool in your arsenal for being a great speaker is storytelling, right? That is the method to engage your audience, to persuade your audience. So when watching her do her mastery of her craft, it was so absolutely incredible. But then in addition to that, she actually called some speakers up on stage, and I didn't get picked. I was in the back like, oh no, but I didn't get picked. And so I wanted to have that opportunity to get coached live by Kelly. So she would have speakers get up on stage and tell a 5-minute story. So whatever your story was, at 5 minutes time, the alarm goes off. And then she sits with you and she debriefs it and she helps you to pick it apart and literally, she looks at every line in her stories and she asks herself, what would provide the maximum impact for the audience? Like how could I say this in a way that would be truly compelling and engaging for the audience? And what I think it really boiled down to, if I could say what my biggest takeaway was from her message, was that we are all in sales. Whether you're a leader and you're leading change, which by the way, if you're a leader, you should always be leading change, right? Things are moving so fast, you have to be leading change. Whether you're an employee, you're constantly selling people on doing something within your organization, what to do, what to think, what to buy, right?
Yeah. Do you know why I know I'm a great salesperson?
Why?
Because I ended up with you.
Oh, that's good. That was like your best sales job, right?
Yeah.
I thought I was selling you. Yeah, but I mean, you think about it. In life, everything we do, like trying to sell my husband on getting out of the house on time, It's all about persuasion, right? Yeah. So here's the thing.
That's kind of a blind spot for you. So.
Oh my gosh. Anyway.
So what's the opinion?
The opinion really is if you want to become more influential, become a masterful storyteller. And here's why.
Why?
Well, leaders need to be influencing people to change all the time. And if your attempts at getting people to change, another way to say this, if your attempts of getting your employees to do what you want them to do are falling flat, then your organization is really at risk. Your job is at risk. Your employees' jobs are at risk. So it's a big deal.
So what do you think normally happens? So give me a scenario of what normally happens in an organization with a leader that is trying to push their agenda or trying to sell an idea, whether it's the business idea, the corporate idea, or their own idea of how things should be.
Well, let's just talk about some of those ideas maybe that are bigger ideas, bigger changes that leaders are trying to push. What I see way too often is that the leader will be behind closed doors with their executive team or the leadership of the department, wherever that change is taking place, and they work that strategy and they think about what to do and why to do it. And so they have all of these great conversations to come up with the idea for change and the commitment, the decision to make the change. But then when they get out there in the field and they start pushing this change and sharing it with their team, they end up just talking about the do. And what I mean by that is most people, when pushing a new objective, they'll say, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it.
Right.
All focused on the change itself, the action itself. And that's the biggest mistake that can be made, because if you're starting with the solution, with the action, you don't have the mindset shift yet. And we all know that every single person in this world has some level of resistance to change. So if you're going straight to the action and you're not selling them on the why, and you're not sharing with them, how you would overcome their objections, if you're not sharing the why now, like that's all the starting point, right?
Yeah.
And then sharing with them the vision. What does it look like? What does it feel like when we've accomplished this change before you ever think about getting to the solution and the action steps?
So I've been in meetings where I've sat down and I've had that exact thing happen to me, where they're just giving the action item, the things that I need to do, and the resistance immediately, because I think it's human nature for the most part for people to be like, well, if it's not my idea, I have my own set of ideas of the way it should be and it ought to be.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about my ideas. So the resistance immediately goes up. So it didn't allow me for the buy-in to understand and help me out here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I mean, you think about this. If you don't have the mental buy-in, if you haven't gotten behind the idea up here first, are your actions ever really going to take hold? Like, are you going to be able to drive a change, especially a significant change, right? So let me just go back, because what you just said made me think about how we do this in coaching, right? I think about coaching is there's two different types of change. So in coaching, one thing we know for certain is it's always about, being a catalyst to help someone make a change that will help them be more successful. The two different types of change, one is behavioral change. This is exactly what we're talking about with just the do. Okay, so Paul, you've got a habit that you don't like, and I'm going to tell you to do something different. We're just going to focus on your activity, and every day you're going to check in and make sure you're doing the activity. That is a behavioral change. We're just focused on behavior, changing behavior. And then there's another part that's I think way more powerful, way more lasting, which is transformational change. That's where we go deep into, Paul, why are you doing what you're doing?
So, but what does this have to do with storytelling?
We're going to get to the storytelling part. The part is like,
I don't want to confuse people with a whole bunch of different ideas.
Okay, so let me tie this up for you. Behavioral change versus transformational change. If you're trying to sell a big idea and you just go to somebody and you talk to them about what they need to do differently, you may get a shift in behaviors a little bit. But to get to the transformational, this is where storytelling comes in, because we've got to find out what's not working right now. Like, you've got to come up with the fact that there's some kind of problem with how you're doing things right now. Okay?
Right. Okay. So if you're identifying a problem, objections, you anytime you're going after and you're talking to direct reports, employees about the change, you definitely want to overcome those objections. That's simple sales, maybe not 101, but it's definitely, it's covering those objections up front. But the other thing is identifying what is the problem initially. Like, a lot of times people don't even know what the problem is. And you, as the leader, need to identify immediately what is the problem. What are we fighting against, so that we get everybody on board with, in agreement that this is an issue. So
we just watched a video of Elon Musk in one of his talks, and I want you to talk a little bit about that to give some context here. We watched a talk, and I actually don't know when that was filmed. Do you know when that was filmed?
I think maybe a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're watching a film on Elon Musk really sharing his idea of going to battery source, solar filled batteries compared with fossil fuels, right? So it's a big idea, and it's a big change that he's really trying to get his whole team behind, right? Yep. And so when watching this video, the very first thing he did in his opening, do you remember?
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah, he was just identifying to the group of people that were there for this conference, was that the fossil fuel and energy is creating the carbon dioxide, and eventually that's, with as many people that are on Earth, that is going to cause problems, and that we do need to go to battery as a source of energy, and it's really solar as a base of energy, and using the battery packs. So he really got everybody lined up and behind the enemy, right? Yeah.
There's a battle we're facing.
Right.
Here's the enemy, and the enemy was fossil fuels. And he gave just a couple of data points, showed a couple of charts, so that people were getting a little fired up about, we can't let this happen. We've got to rally around this, you
Right.
know, so kind of identifying what the issue is. And he did it kind of in the form of, we need to conquer this. We need to fight against this,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So identifying the problem is a big first step. Now, how many leaders try to influence a change, but they don't talk about the why? Almost no one talks about the why enough. And because as a leader, you understand the why, and you've had maybe days of conversation, weeks, months, years of conversation with different executives. But how are you translating that? The best way to translate it is through story. You tell it in the form of a story. What's the problem? You know? And that's when people get engaged, because if you tell it in the form of a story, then people are going to actually lock into it. You can transport them to this story and get them involved and engaged.
Yeah, and why? Why are we doing it? What would be the reason that we would want to change what we're currently doing? Mm-hmm. And why would it be so much better if we did this change? Why would it be so much better for us?
Yeah, and so you might do that in the form of what the dissatisfaction is currently. You might do that in the form of what's possible and what it could mean for, you know, what it can mean for your organization to make this change. There's also the urgency of, why is now the right time, right? Because you might have a lot of people who are so used to doing it a certain way, they think, okay, that's great, but why now?
Yeah.
You've got to solve that, because that's going to be one of the objections. So really thinking through, with any big change, where are we going to get resistance? You're crazy not to think through where this resistance is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, it's really putting yourself in the shoes of who you're speaking to, or who you're trying to sell this idea
Whatever
to.
Audience.
So if you go in thinking this is a fantastic idea, you really should step into the other people's shoes and take a look at, what are the objections? What are other people feeling? How have you felt when other people have come to you with an idea that maybe you don't agree with? So,
and I really liked what Kelly Swanson left me with. I really liked the idea that you're in sales. We're all in sales all the time, selling someone on our ideas, what to do, what to think, where to be, what to buy. And so if you get to this place of really identifying, you know, what's going to happen, you're persuading someone to do or think something, what is the pushback going to be? And in your story, overcome those objections, right? Mm-hmm. So that's all about the why. And this fits very well into our model, by the way. Then what's the vision? What does it look like when we've solved this issue? Not just as what does it look like, how does it feel? And doing it in a way where you can actually help people get that sense, that feeling, feel the feeling of what it's going to feel like when this change has actually been accomplished, right? And I think this is another area that most people don't communicate enough. And you can't over communicate this, right? You can't over communicate the vision for what it's going to be like when the change has taken place.
Yep.
And then that's the only time that you're finally ready. Once you have that buy-in up here, then you're finally ready for, now let's talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Because of course, that's going to be a major area of resistance too, is how the heck are we going to accomplish this?
Well, and examples of it. So it's one thing to talk about the creating the vision and, you know, what it'll look like kind of just in this fantasy world in the future. But how have other companies, what have other people done in the past where you can show real life examples that it actually has been done and it works? Mm-hmm. So,
or in some cases, like in Elon Musk's case, he's selling an idea that really is groundbreaking, right? So in that case, how much more time does he have to spend overcoming that resistance before talking about what we're going to do? So I think, you know, it's all relative. The bigger the change, the more weight we have to put on the why, the more weight we have to put on the vision, the more we need to tell stories. I mean, look, our 2,000-year-old brains, we were wired for storytelling. Mm-hmm. And this is why anytime you've ever seen a speaker at a conference, I want you to go back and think about the best speaker you've ever heard at a conference. What is it that you remember? Chances are really good you walked away from whatever that program was remembering the story and remembering how it made you feel, right? We're going after emotion because, okay, this is a battle some people have in their minds. What is it that actually causes someone to buy something? Is it logic or is it emotion?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you.
Emotion.
Okay.
Yeah. And
how do you know that?
Because I always buy an emotion.
You do.
Yeah.
And what about other people who would argue with you and say, no, it's absolutely logic?
And I think it's becoming way more prevalent now with Amazon and the way that we buy things that I get on my phone. It's so easy that it's the emotion. I get excited about the product. I read the reviews, and now I'm getting more emotionally involved in this product. I knew I wanted it because I searched for it, but then I finally got on and I started looking around, and people are saying, this is great. This, you know, it can either influence me to buy it, or it can deter me from buying it. And then I go on and maybe find a different product that's similar to it.
And
right?
you think about reviews are really like little mini stories.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
totally.
So we do buy on emotion. And I can't remember who first said this as an example, but I remember hearing years ago as a something that confirms that we buy based on emotion and not based on logic is take a look at your watch right now. If you're wearing a watch. Okay. So if you are someone who is much younger, you're like, that's my cell phone, right? But you take a look at it.
Watches are coming back.
Watches are coming back because these smartwatches, this is my new selfie watch.
Yeah, they make them look cool now.
So you look at your watch right now, and how much did you spend on that watch? If the answer is more than $15, you bought an emotion, right? Mm-hmm. Because you could find a watch easily for $15 that tells you the time. So if that was the purpose for you buying the watch.
Or your wife bought on emotion because she bought me this watch.
Yeah, your wife buys on emotion a lot, a lot. Okay, so let's link that back together. If we know we buy on emotion, whether it's a product or whether it's an idea, we buy based on emotion. What is the single best tool you have to get to emotion with somebody? Storytelling.
Yeah.
Right? Think about the last time you watched a movie and cried. Can you remember? What's the last time you cried in a movie? I had one just recently. But I will tell you, yesterday, Kelly's closing story. Mm-hmm. Kelly told an amazing story yesterday. It was about Ethel, right? And I will not go back and tell her story, but you can find her at Kelly Swanson on YouTube. So find her, subscribe to her. You want to hear some masterful storytelling, please do that. But she told this story about Ethel, and it was so powerful that I actually felt like I was there in the room with Ethel in the convalescent home. Mm-hmm. And at the end of her story, she reached a level of emotion for me that, sometimes you just have like that little tear that kind of, you kind of brush away. I had like the ugly fat tears coming down because she touched so much emotion. I was able to look backwards and think about my grandmother and my family and when she was in, an Alzheimer's unit, and then potentially look forward and say what that could be like. And so I was so wrapped up. I was crying the ugly tears.
Yeah. And so I think and to kind of tie this all together and wrap it all up with, story being the way to connect to people emotionally to get them to accept your ideas or influence them. We think of storytelling, could be in a joke or it could be just, a simple story that we come up with. What I really, really understood from Kelly this weekend in the workshop that we were in on storytelling was that it has to be crafted. It has to be, it's the writing of a story. It's really touching the points, and really covering, a couple of those, getting the why up front, covering the vision, all that. But it's also the words you say and how you say them, your tonality, your speed, and also, the pause to make this, story be much more impactful.
Right. And knowing when
it's the crafting part. And I think that's why, we'll talk about this topic. We're on it right now, and people are saying, oh yeah, I totally understand. You get a story tell and come up with an idea and be able to talk about the vision and the why and all that. That's the logical part of it. The real emotional part is taking the time and structuring that story to make sure it has the most impact. Most people will not do that, will never do it, and they won't get the impact that they truly want to get.
And why won't most people do it? Because they think their story is good enough. They think they're good enough at storytelling. So they won't actually sit down and write and rewrite and cut. One of the coolest things she said was, you think about the story that you're telling, try to cut half of it out. And then you let the parts that you cut out audition to make it back into your story, right? Yeah. Because we know that attention spans are much shorter than they've ever been before. So how do you take this story that might be a 15-minute story and make an impact in 5. I think it was Mark Twain who said, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, less is more, right?
Less is more.
And it took me a long time, but I finally listened to Old Man and the Sea, and by Ernest Hemingway. And if you've ever read any of his books or you've listened to them, it won a Pulitzer Prize. He was an amazing storyteller. So much detail, so much information in there, but he never wasted words. It was always exactly what he wanted to say. And that was really cool. So I learned a lot from that. And that was kind of dovetailing into the storytelling workshop this weekend.
Yeah.
So they really worked together. But
maybe next week what we can do is tell a story. Like let's take what we've learned and take a specific story that we've been working on. And after, we've been in this workshop with Kelly and everything we've been studying, let's do it. You want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll do that for next week. So tune in next week. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Evolve to Win show. And if you liked this message, please share it. And please, feel free to reach out to us and share any thoughts or comments you have on your own storytelling. What works, what doesn't work. Yeah?
Yeah. Great. Have yourself a fantastic week, and we'll see you next week with our story.